Chapter 27. Ernie, do we have time to stay here a couple days so I can train her on the basics? Fred asked. I was already thinking the same thing, Ernie said. We all need time to rest and get our heads straight. We've still got a long way to go, and no idea what we'll run into. This place is as safe as it gets for now. Can we start now? Sky asked, her voice steady despite the bruising. Ernie lifted his head when she did, their attention locking into the same lane without effort. Kinda early, don't you think? I won't be able to go back to sleep anyway. Letty stepped forward. I'm in. I couldn't sleep either. And I want the refresher. Fred kept going with training after we were kids, but I stopped as soon as our parents let me. Fred gave her a small nod, the kind siblings fall into without thinking. Ernie rolled his shoulder once, testing it. I'll join in. It's been a while since I've run drills with a group, and it'll help keep this shoulder loose. There are mats in the exercise room downstairs. They took the elevator down together. Sky stood slightly forward, weight on her good leg. Ernie shifted a moment later, unconsciously matching her readiness. Shadow stayed upstairs. Ernie knew the dog would panic if he thought Sky was being attacked. Fred started with stances and basic movements. Practice these until they're second nature. Sky planted her feet, jaw set. Ernie stepped into a similar stance beside her, not copying her exactly, but falling into the same rhythm. As they moved through the basics, their bodies aligned naturally, the way people do when they trust each other, even if they don't realize it yet. Letty joined in, and soon all four of them were working, sweat building, muscles burning. Sky's breathing steadied, Ernie's settled into a similar cadence. Fred watched them both with a small, knowing smirk but didn't comment. Hours passed before Fred finally said, let's call it a day. We'll practice again tomorrow. Then I'll show you defensive moves. They rode back upstairs and made food. Everyone drifted into their own quiet, couch, book, chair. Ernie sat at the monitors, clicking through the cameras, enlarging images to study them. Sky loaded the washer with her dirty clothes, added detergent, started the cycle, then settled on the couch with a movie. Shadow curled beside her. Ernie snorted. Traitor. Sky grinned. Shadow lifted his head, then trotted over to Ernie. He scratched the dog's ears. It's okay, boy. You're still a traitor, but I know you'll be there when I need you. Sky's smile softened, and she turned back to the movie. Fred didn't sleep. He rested in the recliner with one boot on the floor, posture loose but eyes half open, the kind of rest soldiers take when they don't trust the world enough to fully shut down. He watched Ernie out of the corner of his eye, tracking the way the man favored his shoulder, the way he scanned the room even while pretending to relax. Ernie noticed. Of course he did. Trained men always know when another trained man is watching. He didn't turn his head, but he shifted his weight just slightly, a silent I see you. Fred rose quietly and walked over to him. Ernie didn't look away from the monitors, but his posture changed, open enough to acknowledge Fred, guarded enough to keep the weight off his shoulder. You holding up? Fred asked, voice low. Ernie finally glanced over, just long enough to read Fred's stance, breathing, and the tension in his jaw. He took in everything in a single trained sweep, the same way Fred had been reading him. Been worse, Ernie said. Fred huffed a quiet breath. Yeah. I figured. Ernie's eyes narrowed a fraction, not suspicious, just understanding. He knew what Fred was really asking. And Fred knew Ernie knew. Me too, Fred added, softer this time. Not an admission. A truth. For a moment, they stood shoulder to shoulder, both of them scanning the room, both of them checking on Sky, both of them checking on each other without saying it. Two soldiers. Two protectors. Two men who'd survived too much to trust easily, but were starting to trust each other anyway. Ernie didn't thank him. Fred didn't expect him to. But the air between them shifted, just a hair, into something steadier. Something like respect. Something like I've got your back. Later, when the room had settled into quiet again, Ernie finished locking the system and found Sky waiting near the doorway. Her hands were tight on her bag strap, but her voice stayed steady. "Ernie, we need to talk." He turned toward her immediately. "What's wrong?" "It's about Fred and Letty." She took a breath. "I think we should tell them." "About me?" Ernie didn't react with surprise, just quiet understanding. "You sure?" "They're part of us now," she said. "They've earned the truth. And I don't want them finding out by accident." Ernie stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If we tell them, it stays between the four of us. No one else. Ever." Sky shook her head. "No. It's my choice, who knows? Mine. Not the world's. Not anyone else's. If I tell someone, it's because I decided to." Ernie's posture eased, pride flickering through his expression. "Then that's the rule. Your choice. Always." She nodded. "Then, yeah. Let's tell them." They gathered in the living room after dinner. Fred and Letty looked up immediately when Ernie cleared his throat. "We need to talk to you both," he said. "And it stays in this room." Fred straightened. Letty set her mug down. Sky stepped forward. "I'm not a boy. I never was." Letty blinked, then softened. Fred let out a slow breath, more relieved than anything. "That's it?" Fred said. "Kid, I thought you were about to tell us you were bit or something." Letty elbowed him. "What he means is, thank you for trusting us." Sky lifted her chin. "And just so we're clear, it's my choice, who knows? Not anyone else's. Not ever." Fred nodded, soldier serious. "Understood. We don't say a word unless you tell us to." Letty raised her hand like taking an oath. "Locked down. Your call, always." Sky exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. Ernie's did too, though he'd never admit it. "You're still family," Fred said. "Nothing changes." Letty smiled. "Except now I get to help you with girl stuff if you want." Sky laughed, small, real, and the room settled into something warmer. Something safer. Later, Letty asked, "Where were you when all this started?" She told the story. Ernie listened quietly, posture softening when hers did. "How did you and Sky meet?" she asked. "Sky saved me," Ernie said. "I was in my store with Shadow when everything started." He told his story. Sky's voice drifted from across the room when Letty asked how she ended up there. "I was on the trail when everything hit the fan." Ernie and Letty both looked toward her. Fred lifted his head too, listening. "It's not like we were loved," Sky said. "That foster family had its own issues." She headed to the kitchen to find dinner. No one said much after that. They all helped cook, ate in silence, then went to their rooms. Sky folded her laundry and repacked her bag, wanting to be ready when Ernie said it was time to go. She'd put on her modified device that morning and felt better overall. Her face was still swollen and bruised, but improving. Ernie came out with his arms full of dirty clothes. Sky stepped aside at the same moment he shifted to pass her, an easy, unconscious alignment. He loaded his laundry into the washer. "I'm going to cut my hair, shower, and then we should find something for breakfast," he said. Sky nodded and headed toward the kitchen. Letty was already up, cooking bacon, eggs, biscuits, gravy, and coffee. Sky breathed in deeply, grateful. Ernie and Fred walked in. Ernie rinsed mugs while Fred set the table. Letty and Sky brought trays of food over, and Fred added butter, jam, and creamer. Ernie poured coffee for everyone. "When we go down, we'll run through the basics again," Fred said. "Then I'll show you defensive moves." They drilled through the basics. Fred demonstrated strikes and kicks, explaining how to keep distance and follow through. Sky picked up everything quickly but kept practicing to build stamina and muscle memory. Ernie moved beside her, their footwork falling into the same cadence. When she shifted her weight, he adjusted his stance a moment later, not copying, just matching her energy. They took a break for lunch, talking about the rest of their journey and what they might encounter. They had about 3 hours left to reach the bunker, on a normal day. Sky's face looked better, and Ernie decided they could stay a few more days to continue training and healing. The workouts were helping his shoulder, and the training would help them all in the fights ahead. He noticed Sky and Letty walking off together. He figured they were testing the device. When they returned, Letty nodded, and Sky looked pleased. "It'll work way better than before," she said. "You ready to continue?" Fred asked. They checked the cameras, nothing unusual, then went downstairs to practice. They trained for hours, sparred, repeated the process for a few more days until they had most of it down. Before bed, Ernie said, "We can leave in the morning. It's only 3 hours. Hopefully the bunker's safe." They nodded and packed their gear, restocking food. Ernie added everyone's fingerprints to the system and agreed that if anything happened, they'd meet there. He programmed a unique code and handed Fred and Letty extra keys and access codes. "I want to show you something," he said. They walked 2 miles to another secure barn. Ernie entered a code and pressed his thumb to the screen. The door opened, revealing another truck identical to Fred and Letty's, stocked with supplies. "One day, you're gonna have to tell us how all this came about," Fred said. Ernie grinned. After shutting the door, he wiped down the screen. "Keys to that truck are in the desk drawer. Where the monitors are." They nodded and returned to the bunker. Morning came quietly. After breakfast, they loaded their gear into the vehicles. The bunker barn felt still and safe behind them, but it was time to move. Ernie started the general and rolled slowly toward the open barn doors. Fred followed in the truck, both engines rumbling low in the cool morning air. Sky climbed into the passenger seat, and Shadow hopped into the back, settling right behind her with his head between the seats, watching her closely. Letty stood by the door, waiting. Once both vehicles were outside, she pulled the heavy barn door closed with both hands, leaning her weight into it until it latched the way Ernie had shown her. She checked it once more out of habit, then jogged to Fred's truck and climbed in. They eased down the long dirt drive, tires crunching over gravel still damp from the night's humidity. The barn shrank behind them, tucked safely into the trees. Sky glanced back over her shoulder. Shadow met her eyes instantly, ears forward, tail thumping once against the seat. She brushed her fingers over his muzzle before turning forward again. They turned onto the narrow dirt road that led away from the property, away from the direction they'd originally come in. The morning was quiet, the sky heavy with dark clouds rolling in from the west. Sky looked out into the passenger side mirror. A few shambling figures moved far in the distance, but none close enough to worry about. She faced forward again, settling into her seat as the wind began to pick up.